Most of your financial decisions don't feel dramatic. They feel ordinary, quiet, almost invisible. Many of them don't even feel like decisions at all. They stay open, unresolved. You don't say yes, you don't say no. You let time quietly choose for you. You tell yourself you're waiting for clarity, for confidence, for the right moment. You call it patience, responsibility, being careful. And because nothing visibly goes wrong, it feels like you're doing the sensible thing. But if you slow down and really pay attention, there's a pattern underneath all of this. A subtle hesitation whenever money is involved. A quiet need to stay on the safe side. A mental reflex that leans toward the familiar instead of the uncertain. You don't experience this as fear. You experience it as being reasonable. You might hesitate longer than necessary before acting. You might avoid certain opportunities because they feel uncomfortable to fully engage with. You might keep things exactly as they are, not because they're ideal, but because change introduces tension, and tension feels unnecessary. From the outside, this looks like discipline. From the inside, it feels like holding your breath just enough that you don't notice it unless you stop and check. Your financial life keeps moving, but it doesn't feel open or expansive. It feels narrow, guarded, like you're constantly protecting something fragile. And that's where most financial behavior actually begins, not with numbers or strategies, but with an emotional posture toward uncertainty, a posture shaped less by logic and more by something older, quieter, and far more influential than most people realize. The deeper problem isn't that you're bad with money. It's that fear has quietly taken on a role it was never meant to have. Fear has become the decision maker, while logic has been reduced to a spokesperson, brought in afterward to explain why the decision made sense. Most people believe fear is useful with money. They think it keeps them safe. They think it prevents mistakes, losses, embarrassment, regret. So when fear shows up, they listen, they trust it, they mistake its presence for wisdom. But fear doesn't exist to help you build a future. Fear exists to help you avoid pain in the present. It's a short-term survival mechanism living in a long-term world. And when it's given authority over financial decisions, it doesn't create disaster, it creates stagnation. This is why so much common advice doesn't work. It assumes the issue is discipline, or intelligence, or effort, as if the problem is that you don't know what to do. But most people already know. They know saving matters. They know investing matters. They know emotional spending isn't ideal. The misunderstanding is psychological. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. It disguises itself as caution, as realism, as being smart. It says things like, let's wait until things feel more stable, or I don't want to rush into something, or now isn't the right time. And because those thoughts sound responsible, they go unquestioned. The psychology behind this is deeply human. Your mind is wired to prioritize avoiding loss over achieving gain, not because you're weak, but because for most of human history, losing meant danger. Gaining extra was optional. That wiring didn't disappear when money replaced food and shelter as the primary symbol of security. It simply adapted. Today, your brain reacts to financial uncertainty the same way it once reacted to physical threat. This is why losing money feels personal, even when it's temporary. Why market fluctuations feel threatening, even when they're normal. Why the idea of being wrong financially feels heavier than the idea of missing out. Fear also compresses your sense of time. When fear is active, your mind doesn't think in years or decades. It thinks in moments. It asks, what if this goes wrong, instead of what happens if I never act? So decisions get filtered through emotional discomfort rather than long-term impact. Holding on to cash feels safe, even if its value erodes quietly. Avoiding investment feels responsible, even if it costs you growth. Doing nothing feels neutral, even though it's still a choice with consequences. Another layer most people don't notice is identity. Money decisions aren't just about outcomes, they're about what they say about you. Being wrong with money can feel like being careless, foolish, or irresponsible. So fear steps in to protect your self-image. It encourages inaction because inaction can't easily be criticized. If you never decide, you never fail. If you never try, you never have to face evidence that you misjudged something. This is why fear often produces a very specific financial life, one that looks stable on the surface, but feels constrained underneath. A life defined less by mistakes and more by things that never happened. Even spending behavior isn't immune to this. Emotional spending isn't always about desire or lack of discipline. Often, it's about relief. Spending creates a brief sense of control, a moment where the tension lifts and the future goes quiet. For a short time, you feel decisive, present, grounded. Then the relief fades and fear returns, usually stronger, now reinforced by guilt. What makes fear especially powerful is how convincing it sounds. It pulls up memories of past mistakes. It highlights worst-case scenarios. It points to stories where things went wrong. And because those stories exist, fear feels justified. Your mind naturally overweights vivid emotional examples and underweights quiet, boring success. Losses are loud. Progress is subtle. So fear feels informed even when it's incomplete. The shift that changes everything isn't eliminating fear. That's impossible. The shift is removing fear from the role of authority. Fear was never meant to lead. It was meant to signal. When fear becomes a signal instead of a command, your relationship with money changes. You stop asking, "Does this feel safe?" and start asking, "What kind of safety is this giving me?" There's emotional safety, which seeks comfort, certainty, and familiarity. And there's financial safety, which often requires discomfort, uncertainty, and patience. Confusing the two is where most people get stuck. Another unconventional shift is redefining risk. Most people define risk as the possibility of losing money. But stagnation is also a risk. Delay is also a risk. Inaction is not neutral. It simply hides its cost over time. When you see doing nothing as a decision rather than a default, fear loses leverage. It can no longer pretend it's protecting you without trade-offs. A powerful psychological strategy is controlled exposure to financial discomfort, not recklessness. Exposure, making small decisions that involve uncertainty and staying present with the emotional reaction instead of escaping it. The goal isn't profit. The goal is nervous system training. Teaching yourself that discomfort doesn't equal danger, that uncertainty doesn't require immediate action, that you can tolerate ambiguity without losing control. Another subtle shift is learning to delay fear's voice. Fear speaks urgently. It wants immediate resolution, but emotional intensity fades with time. When you pause instead of reacting, you often discover that the decision itself didn't change, only the pressure did. Separating your identity from your outcomes matters more than most people realize. When mistakes are treated as personal failures, fear will dominate every choice. When mistakes are treated as feedback, fear relaxes. Learning becomes possible. True confidence with money doesn't come from certainty. It comes from trust. Trust that you can handle discomfort, that you can adapt, that you can recover. Fear tells you to wait for guarantees. Reality offers resilience instead. When fear stops running the show, your financial behavior becomes calmer, not riskier. You stop reacting to noise. You stop needing constant reassurance. Decisions become slower, clearer, and less emotionally charged. Money becomes a tool again, not a constant negotiation with your nervous system. The core truth is simple, but uncomfortable. Fear doesn't mean stop. Fear means pay attention. It's information, not instruction. When you learn to listen without obeying, your financial life quietly changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but permanently. And from that place, decisions stop being about avoiding pain and start being about building a life that actually feels secure.